Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Chip Fridrich, will talk Vanderbilt baseball. So let's get right to our interview with Chip. Chip Fridrich joins me. It is Monday afternoon. Chip, since you and I last talked, Vanderbilt has won a weekend series at Kentucky, 2-1. It has won a midweek game, so we have lots to talk about. Hope you're doing well, sir.
Doing well, Chris. Hope you are. The thing that I harken back to when talking to some people, some former players and fans that I bumped into, is they got the job done this weekend. It wasn't pretty. Saturday certainly wasn't pretty. Friday was great, and you see Chris McElvain and Little get the combined no-hitter, and McElvain is rewarded with getting SEC Pitcher of the Week. I'm not sure if you saw that. Just came across this morning, and very much well-deserved. So, you win a series, and at this time of year, you want to stack wins and stack series to get that resume a little more fluffed up, and you look at the series coming, the things that are looming ahead, and I did that this morning when the D1 baseball top 25 rankings come out, when you and not in this order, but you got Arkansas, Georgia, Texas A&M, and LSU, and those four teams are in the top 22 teams in the country. So not going to be an easy task. It never is in this league, and if anything this year, even though the West is a little more ahead on the win column than the East, you're seeing a lot of power teams in this league. Some of the faces are new, especially the Auburns and the Georgias from where they are, but this team has its work cut out for them. But they did the job, won the series, probably should have swept, and that would have been a nice to get some of the back in the win column, get some wins as far as stacked up from where they've left some on the table. But this, I don't know sure if you thought this like I did. It felt a lot like the South Carolina series, where a big win on Friday night and then two losses. And luckily, as far as taking care of it and getting 4 runs in the first 2 innings against Kentucky on Sunday, they avoided that collapse. But sure made it interesting late. And there were some heart palpitations, I'm sure, by many on that Sunday game when things got a little hairy. But 2 out of 3 on the road in this league and getting your first league wins as far as the series wins was a bonus, and see if they can build on that without a game in the midweek. And they got a very, very tough Texas A&M team who's took 2 out of 3 this weekend from Arkansas, and they've won 3 straight series coming into town for one of those unique Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. So a quick turnaround for the Commodores.
Yeah, I'm not big on keeping up with rankings for any sport. For the most part, it's not the worst thing that they're not ranked in terms of crimes against humanity or whatever you want to phrase it. I'm always amused with 2 things with the rankings. There's no differentiation between series wins, whether it's 2-1 or 3-1. And like if you pile up a bunch of those over time, you lose the distinction there that I think matters. And the other thing, midweek games apparently do not matter at all. I think all that pollsters look at is, did you win your series? Doesn't matter who it was against. Just did you win it or not? You could win it 3-0 or 2-1, and if you're 2 and the other team is 1, and you're 2 and you went 3-0 and one went 2-1, well, you won your series. You still stay there. And I don't know if any other team in the country is unbeaten in the midweek. I think that matters. I mean, apparently it doesn't matter in the polls. And I'm not saying it matters a ton, but I don't think it matters 0. Otherwise, why do you play the game? So they're not ranked again in either of the 2 polls, BA or D1. They are ranked in the coaches. Perception and reality with this team is just interesting to me. Not just rankings, but their fans too. And I know the computer polls don't get a lot of run, and I don't know how much stock you put into them. But I'm looking this morning, again, that they're unranked. And the computers, the ones that I look at that get updated every day, they're 8 in RPI. They're 3 in Kenneth Massey. They're 6 in Boyd's World. They are 9th in Warren Nolan's ELO, and they're 7th in Sonny Moore.
Yeah, and I mean those are the ones that kind of are head scratchers. And but when you've been at the top for so long, you've been at that upper echelon. When you take a fall, sometimes those they want to make you earn it back. Do you agree with me on that a little bit? And
I think there's a delayed reaction. And when you start getting the momentum your way, it starts to turn once you get back in, and maybe your climb goes a little faster. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't pay a lot of attention to those for a reason. I really don't care. If I really want to figure out who's better, I'll do my own digging. And I'm not being critical. Like I'm friends with some of those guys at D1 and I'm acquainted with some of the guys at BA. They're all fine people. They do a lot of work. I don't frankly know how they do all the work they do. And when you've got a million things to cover and write and you're doing rankings, it's an easy shortcut just to say, well, this team won its series, and so it stays or moves up, and this team lost a series, and just say, well, let's see who won and who lost and move these teams up and down accordingly. It's a shortcut in a situation where you don't have a lot of time. So I don't say that to be critical of any of those guys. I'm just saying I've noticed that over the years, and I don't get in arguments with the fan base about what they think of the team or whether they're right or wrong. And I will say this, the thing that does bother me about them is, they played half their conference schedule against what I think are the worst 3 teams in the league. That's Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina. Now, I don't think any of those teams are bad. And I think what's coming up is the best half of the league other than Tennessee, which they've already faced. So I think it's about to get a lot tougher. Exams are going to be over in 2 weeks too. They've got 2 more weeks to play with exams going on. So that'll be interesting too. 1 on the road, 1 at home. But it's funny because you saw our board. You're on there. I don't know what was said on Twitter, but I can imagine it's the same. It's the hand-wringing over the hitting, and the lineup's terrible. The lineup's not terrible. The lineup is average for the SEC, which is not bad. But the lack of clutch hitting at times, which I've always maintained, the people that study it say that comes around. No, the bottom of the order was awful on Sunday. They got 1 runner on and 7 strikeouts, I believe, from memory. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's funny to me, like this team throws a no-hitter, has 17 in a third straight hitless innings. And like by the time Saturday rolls around and Sunday rolls around, all everybody's talking about is the hitting. That fan base has an amazing ability. And I'm not saying the criticisms aren't fair, by the way, because I think some of them are. But that's just kind of where it is with that fan base and this team. They have this amazing run with pitching that usually you'd be talking about. And instead, all the focus is on, well, they're 9-9 and they're not hitting well with this guy, that guy, and that guy. And I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, and answer a few of your questions that you rolled out there. No, I don't think it's important that they're ranked right now. If this team is going to make a run that they're going to have to the teams in front of them will take care of itself if they win series. So being ranked in last week in April is no big deal to me, and I don't think it's a hill of beans to Tim Corbin and his staff and his team. I'm sure they've made that point, on several times. It doesn't have to be made anymore. They just want to continue to keep playing hard and stacking wins. But yeah, the wringing of hands after the no hitter. It's a short life. The SEC weekends are very difficult in this league. I don't care. There's definitely more balance than there's been in a long, long time. You've seen some teams flip up to the top of the league that have not been anywhere near that lately in the last couple years. I make it akin to almost like Alabama football, which is, Alabama's been at the top of the heap for so long in football under Saban, and yet Saban, they beat somebody 52-0 in a non-league game in September, and his press conferences always have questions, or their fan bases always throw out ridiculous questions about these kids and why didn't they do this better, and it's just nitpicking. I'm not saying that the questions are not warranted on this team. I think that just for the fact that we've talked about, Chris, the number of lineup changes that have been on this team as far as trying to find the right chemistry and maybe going, playing the percentages as far as right on left and left on right on the hitting side. And Tim has mentioned many times that there's just, in his opinion, there's more balance than there's ever been on this team as far as abilities. And it makes it really, really hard when you're trying to get playing time and you're trying to get at-bats for these guys, and when they're pretty even. In years past, it hadn't been that way, and lately it has, where the fact that they just can't find the right chemistry. Now, you see Vaz didn't even get a hit at-bat this weekend. Here's a guy who the first, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks of the season, this guy's been a mainstay. And I don't know if he's hurt or or if it's just a direction they're taking. You and I talked about this. He did not get an official at bat in Lexington this weekend. So
he didn't even play as a defensive replacement. I don't think.
And he used to even do that sometimes when he wasn't getting the at bat. So I think you're seeing a lot more balance on this team. Guys who can kind of do a lot of the same things, and they're just still trying to find it. So it's not like it's a big surprise or should be a surprise to anybody. Just for the sheer fact that they're playing this many guys the last week in April and hadn't settled on a lineup for about 3 spots is glaring. The left side of the infield, the left side of the field, has been the question mark hitting. And you got Davis Diaz. He's a young kid and he started tearing it up early. And the Carter Young situation, we don't have to. I mean, he has struggled at several times in the season, and while his glove has been spectacular, left field hitting wise, the entire left side has not been carrying their weight. So it's not like these things should be a big shock. And the fan base thing is just when you've been really, really good and you go through these ups and downs as a fan base of winning a game and throwing a no-hitter, and the next day, play like they did against Kentucky, which in a situation where they're struggling, they've lost several series, 3 in a row. You're thinking sweep there, and they come out of there winning 3-2. It's like everything just that could go wrong, and that Saturday game did. But luckily, they straightened it out on Sunday and got ahead early, and were able to take control. So this is we've talked about a young team. A lot of these teams in the conference. I mean, Tennessee's. I think I mentioned these to you before that we went on here. I mean, the big lefty for UT. He's 24 years old. He's played for 6 years. I mean, UT's got a lineup of 23 and 24-year-olds in there, and that's the rules with COVID and guys. The draft has been shortened, so not as many guys are getting drafted. They're coming back, and that's what a lot of these teams have done. And they've dipped in the portal. Let's not forget that. So it's facts are the facts, but this is the cards that this team is going to be, using the rest of the way, and they've got their chances out in front of them to do the things they want to do. Realistically, will this team finish, 500 in the league? I would think that would be a goal. I mean, 15-15 or so. That sounds like the way they're headed. They just can't get swept, and they got to do a number on Texas A&M, especially their home games with A&M and LSU. And they got to just avoid not getting swept. If they can do that, finishing a game or two over 500, at 500, I think is realistic for just the way they have played, unless they just go on a tremendous tear. But you mentioned the exams. I looked at it, and I always do this just because I'm a former player, and I remember how these affected when I played. In case you missed it, Vanderbilt's a pretty difficult academic school, and those start Monday the 2nd. So you're talking about, this weekend, they got to hit the books, and the next weekend they're out of town. And those are always tough times when you're a student athlete at Vanderbilt to get that done. So you mentioned that, and I wanted to highlight that as well, that it's a time where it takes a lot of sleepless nights or very little sleep and trying to still play ball at the same time.
We have a lot of topics to get to, and I just hope I remember them all. But I think we got to talk about Chris McElvain. And I didn't see it. My son had a doubleheader at the same time, and on top of watching, I'm our scorekeeper, so I'm sitting there really following his game, and it sometimes that requires me to turn off the phone, which I listened through the game, and then I'll follow it on Game Tracker. But I mean, I just kept watching the box score and going, well, he's through the fourth with no hits and the fifth with no hits, and you figured he wasn't going to make it through the game given the way the pitch count was piling up. But what a job he did. And who finished that? Oh, Christian Little finished the game. I mean,
right.
Again, and it wasn't just that. You go back to the Tech game, and they hold Tech hitless, I think, after the third or fourth, and then Carter Holton holds Kentucky hitless for a couple innings. But I felt like Chris McElvain was due to pitch better, and I get that Kentucky's not top third of the league offensively, but it's not bad either. I just thought that was a really impressive game for them on the road in a park where the ball can get out of there at times too.
Yeah, it's similar to UT's field, how it kind of the left center gap reminds me a lot of that park, and balls do jump out of there. It was especially windy this weekend up in Lexington, which it can be this time of year. So McElvain, yeah, I mean, 104 pitches in 7 innings. The pitch count was a little higher than you would like for that, and that's why he didn't finish it. They weren't going to extend him, and I don't blame him there. That happened with Leiter last year in Missouri, and when he had the no-hitter and they took him out. This time of year, you just don't want to stretch guys too much. It's a long season. You got a lot of baseball ahead of you. But he's been a mainstay in that lineup. It's great to see that he took that and ran with it, and hopefully he can just build on that. But yeah, the SEC Pitcher of the Week was named, as I mentioned earlier, and very well deserved. But the staff as a whole, looking at what they did, Carter Holton in the loss, he seems like that. I'm not saying the book is out on the freshman, but he's his innings each outing have gone down and really been 4 innings, 5 innings tops compared to what he was doing earlier in the year. And I'm not saying there's walls that pitchers hit, but in this league, there's different, coaches break down film, they can see tendencies, and this, kind of goes back to what happened in Columbia, in South Carolina when he was pitching so well and had trouble in the first 2 innings. But, Riley came on, limited his walks, but unfortunately they didn't get it done in the win column. And then Cunningham, Maldonado, Berkwood, Schultz got it done on Sunday. Cunningham had, for the 4 innings with the lead, pitched well. Maldonado, I think he's still finding his way back. 2 strikeouts, 2 walks, and 2 1/3. I still don't think he's where he was in any time last year. And then Berkwood threw to a batter, and then Schultz kind of made it interesting late. So overall for the staff, though, obviously the impressive game was McElvain and Little. And I have to really, I'm not, baby steps is not maybe the right word with Little, but stretching him out there a little bit more and more, and his velocity's been electric. He's been 95, 94, 95, and I like the way he's been pitching. It's just whether he can, with runners on this, when he has to go from the stretch, that's been his problem. And if they've worked on that, but he hadn't had to be in the stretch much the way he's been pitching. So glad to see those two get that accomplishment on Friday night.
Holton, to me, is interesting because, I'm a stats guy. The stats would indicate his ERA should be a run or 2 lower than it is based on the number of runners that he's given up. But 2 things, he's been prone to the home run ball, and some of those have been really jacked too. But I just notice a pattern with him time and time again, and you see this a lot with freshman pitchers. Sophomore, junior year, they begin to figure it out. But it just seems to me like he gets flustered and frustrated with runners on. Again, that's a situation he's not ever had to pitch through. And it just seemed like it's like clockwork. He will dominate a couple innings. But, man, if he gives up a leadoff runner, it just seems like there's almost 100% chance somebody's going to score or get a couple on, and you're going to see a big inning. He's got to learn to manage that part.
Yeah, and you look at those 2 guys, Futrell and Holton, the lefties, man, it bodes really, really well for the future of this pitching staff. I mean, next year they're going to be a year older, and, you go lefty-lefty. no matter what order it is, and those two guys are going to be lights out. You have some people who have questioned and said, do those two guys need to be flipped? And perhaps Holton gets some confidence back in the midweek and throw Futrell out there to the Wolves on Saturday and see what he can do. I think if they would have done that, and I think you mentioned this to me, they would have done that perhaps this weekend to get Futrell out there in the conference, and they didn't without having a game this week. And then you've got A&M on the short week, and then you've got Louisville. So I think you and I talked, if it was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now if it didn't happen this past weekend. But, those guys, they've got bright futures here. I'm glad they're on our staff, for the next 3 years. Holton's more over the top. Curveball's probably a little better than Futrell, but, Futrell, I think, has got a big league changeup, and that's been his out pitch. He can throw it in any time. So that's the difference between the two. Could they flip-flop? Is one of your best pitchers pitching during the week? Maybe. That could, as far as stats go, you look at the numbers don't lie. Futrell also hadn't been pitching conference games either, and you got to remember that. And I mentioned that last week. So, it's a tough place to come in as a freshman and pitch in this league. You've seen up and down the media guide book. If you look at the guys who came in as freshmen, and a lot of them were very much given, the opportunities to pitch during the week, and then they got inserted. And some of those guys, Walker Buehler being one of them, who did not get his opportunity till late in the year. You pointed that out to me, almost at the end of the year before he got into the rotation. So it's something that I'm sure that they, I'm not sure. I know they know a lot more than you and I as far as how these guys are ready for it. But I mentioned, Tim mentioned in the press conference where he was kind of very hesitant. I think maybe you made the question to him about Futrell, and he kind of paused and said, well, we got to watch that a little bit. We got to watch
followed by, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Right. So
it's like he thought about it, engaged the question, and then is like, no, we are not going to do that. Taking
advice from Chris Lee and other reporters about making a switch, right, and me here on this broadcast. So, yeah, I just think they're going to stick with it. I think I agree with you, though. You mentioned to me if they would have done it, you could have seen Futrell on Sunday to mix things up, but I don't see it changing really any right now.
The weirdest thing to me, and without looking this up, I think this is correct. The fact that here we are almost to May, and Bryce Cunningham has more starts than Patrick Riley and Christian Little put together. I don't know what odds you could have gotten on that, but I would have. Right. I would have bet the house on that all day against that in February.
Exactly right.
Even in March.
You're right. Yeah, it just the Sunday situation has been like those three, that left field, first base, DH spot, right field sometimes, little 4 spots there, the Sunday starter, except for the last couple, that Cunningham has kind of just been the guy to come in and throw strikes. And remember now, against Florida, he pitched good enough to win in that game, I think, with a normal offensive output. The first 2 games, they hit the ball really well and then chose last Sunday. It's almost like this team is picking a game each weekend to not choosing, but just it so happens they're not getting the breaks. They're hitting a lot of double plays. They're trying. I saw the games that I watched on video from, soccer fields all over Middle Tennessee, and what I was doing on, being a taxi cab driver. Those guys on Saturday were just trying to lift everything. I don't know if you noticed that. Just every batter was a lot of foul balls, lifting. It just didn't look like the hitting discipline was there, and that was the Saturday game that they chose to do that. And then they come back on Sunday, and then the light bulb goes off, and they're hitting balls the other way. They're they're doing the little things that you got to do. And Spencer Jones, look,
that kid has become such a good hitter. This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible.
I mean, there's a couple. My little sons, one of my sons said, "Who would you like to pitch to, Dad, or not like to pitch to in this lineup?" I would want no part of Spencer Jones.
Yeah,
I mean, that guy. Just the way he's at the plate, and he is positioning himself. I know that Kyle Peterson in broadcast has talked about, like, sometimes being that tall can be a detriment in the big leagues. There are not too many guys as big as he is, but he hits the ball really, really hard.
Yeah.
He when he squares up on it, and he's having himself a good year, and it's good to see Bulger, what he's been doing lately, the last several weeks. Spark plug's gone off with him, and that kind of trio, Bulger, Keegan, Jones, is pretty formidable, and they got to keep it up. The bottom half of the order, 7 through 9, have, and I hate saying this, it's the truth. It's being picky. It's not being picky. It's just being raw baseball truth. They've almost been automatic outs, 7, 8, and 9, and you're almost like Little League, where you got your good athletes 1 through 6, and then the guys who aren't very good, or you got to do. And it's interesting that the Bulger situation, Chris, and it kind of just came out. I mean, batting in the 2-hole is something that I never thought Jack Bulger would be doing a month and a half ago, and he was in the 2-hole all 3 spots, all 3 games this weekend.
Yeah, those guys. I think the reason Bulger's in the 2-hole is they like the bat control. They think he can put a bunt down when he needs it. He doesn't strike out a lot, and that was the thing about Jack. Even when he was struggling earlier in the year, he was making contact. It just wasn't getting driven too much. So give credit to Tim Corbin. He stuck it out. They're getting the benefits from that now. I don't think their fans realize how good Jones and Keegan have been. I mean, Keegan's still hitting above 400, which I'm not a big batting average guy, but that's pretty loud. They're both probably right now top 10 offensive players in the league, in a year where the league is just loaded with offensive players, probably in a way that I don't ever remember.
Yeah. I mean, they've sometimes you can pick things apart, but I agree with you. They're having themselves nice years now. They're getting ready to play, as I said, 4 teams in the top 22 currently in the country, and things starting to heat up, and we'll see if that continues. But you're going to have those 3 guys carry, this club offensively. And Colwick has the ability to do it. You just wonder how his hand is doing. He had a big night, and what was he on Saturday night?
He got 3 hits
4,
Sunday.
yeah.
But see, I'm with you. You brought up the thing I was going to bring up next, or one of the things I was going to bring up next. He just is not driving the ball with power.
Yeah.
And that's 2 years in a row that he's hurt his hand, and it just seems to have gone. And he's a guy that Tim's going to want to have in there. He's a grinder. He's a leader. He's steady. He's still contributing value, but I do wonder if we've seen the last of his power as a college kid. And I don't say that to be critical. I mean, if you get a hand injury, and I'm speculating here, but it happened last year, and I'm wondering if that's not the same type thing. Because I remember, I think 2 weekends ago when they were home, you could kind of see him, like he caught a ball or something. You could see him kind of taking his glove off and looking down at his hand.
Third base. He was playing third base.
Right. You saw it. In fact, I might have been sitting with you in the stands when that happened. I think I was.
Yeah.
I think we both, at that point, we both wondered, and maybe it's not a coincidence that you're not seeing doubles and home runs out of him as much.
Was his injury last year? Refresh my memory. Was it the hamate bone?
He had that, and then I think he had another one that I want to say was unrelated in the regional. I could be wrong about that, but like he aggravated that. Oh, man, they were up, I want to say, 8 or 9 runs in the Friday night game against whoever they played, Presbyterian, I guess it was. And he aggravated that and really was never the same the rest of the year.
Yeah, and if people don't know what that is, I mean, it is extremely difficult to even hold a bat, much less swing a bat. And it's where your thumb, as I'm looking down at my palm right now, where the meat of your thumb bone or that area in between there, and it makes squeezing a bat almost impossible. And it's one of the more painful things, and it's frustrating too, because it takes a long, long time for that to heal. And baseball players are subject to, with the amount of reps that they get with that on the hand area of taking batting practice on their own and in practice, whatever, it can be detrimental, and it can be a season-ending injury if you don't watch out. So it's something that you just don't mess with. Kind of like, there's certain things that, like Maldonado's arm injury he had with it. Just you don't want to mess with that because it could shut you down for the rest of the year.
Well, I think a lot of the fans spent the weekend talking about the left side of the infield. Carter Young just has not hit the way he's capable. I don't know what the deal is there. I still have not seen the guy we saw before the injury last year, and maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But the glove has been brilliant. And the same thing for Davis Diaz, who, for like 3 or 4 weeks didn't miss anything. And now he can't. I mean, he's not striking out a lot, but he's not putting anything into play with authority. But the glove, too, has been brilliant. And the left side of your infield, man, that's a big thing in postseason play, and especially with their pitching. Tim has always been pitching and defense first. I don't say that to be critical. I think if you're going to make the choice, that's the one I'd make, too. But I don't see those guys coming out for that reason. I just think the gloves and the arms are so good. And frankly, I don't think either of them can hit worse than they're hitting right now. I think both of them are due to hit better than they are, just if by nothing else, by dumb luck. Again, I see the issues. I'm not saying it's not like these guys are hitting into a bunch of hard outs. Carter's having issues making contact, and Diaz just isn't giving you any pop. But we've seen enough of Tim, and we've seen enough of those guys. I just don't think it's going to change there, and I don't know that I'd change it either, given the way they defend and given the way the team's built.
Yeah, well, Hewitt gets the start first 2 games of the series. Then they go with Leneve yesterday. Hewitt.
Now that one I don't understand. That's one that I just think I was floored that neither Hewitt nor Polk was in the lineup on Sunday.
And then when Hewitt comes in and pinch hits, he gets a hit. He goes 1 for 2. So Hewitt had a nice night. He was 2 for 4 on Friday. Goes hitless on Saturday, and then not sure if they were playing the percentages on Sunday or not. But that's those things can be chopped up and analyzed. But I really do like Hewitt as a player. I think he can run. He can go get balls in the outfield. I have no problem with him out there, and he just seems like he's just a glue guy who gets base. He gets on the bases. He can, and he's done that for the last couple weeks. So I would expect him to be in the lineup this week on Thursday, just a hunch, unless something changes in between time.
We talked defense. We have not mentioned. I don't know if Hewitt took away a home run or a double that would have missed by 2 inches. Looked to me. I thought that ball was leaving the yard, but I'm not sure, the angle of it and everything. And same thing with Brad. And I think the one Bradfield got looked to me like it was leaving the yard. But that's 2 catches their outfield made that saved, what, 4 runs total?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe, or was it 5?
Yeah, and the one that Bradfield makes in the outfield that could have turned that game all the way around. And I'm not sure if that gets out, but if he doesn't catch it, it hits the top of the wall and it bounds around and a couple runs scored. So that was probably the play of the game, I would say, easily for Vanderbilt. And that's where the ball, we were talking about how it juts out like it does in Knoxville, that short area in left center field, and with the wind swirling yesterday, that ball's hit another 3 feet, and it's totally different outcome, perhaps.
Maybe this is a stretch because Hewitt hasn't played a ton, but when he has played, he's been tremendous. And you remember last year, he was their first outfielder off the bench. When they'd go to defensive subs in the 8th or 9th or sometimes 7th, he was playing right away in April. And defense is going to get you on the field in those spots. And the fact that he was on the field told me a lot. And, of course, with Bradfield, he's not coming out. So there's less opportunity there just because center is going to be a rock there and just write that in ink every day. But I feel like Hewitt, Bradfield, Jones, man, I don't know that they've ever put a better combo out there than those 3 when they're out there. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I agree. I think they all have good arms. They can go get balls, especially we don't have to. I was in where I sit at games. There are a couple scouts. I guess there's scout seats behind me, and you see those guys just getting all lathered up about Enrique Bradfield. I mean, talking about catches he's made, and one scout, I'm not sure he was with, behind me just said it's the best catch he's seen all season, and he's been at a game almost every day of the week for the last 3 months. But his jump is just unbelievable. That's how he gets to those balls and his speed. But the way, it was so uncharacteristic, the play he made yesterday in Sunday's game when he sort of misjudged it and went back, and then the wind was swirling and he came in and he didn't make that. Yeah, and he tripped. I don't know what was wrong. Just side note here. Kentucky's turf, I think, is the same as Vanderbilt's. I'm pretty sure. It looked like it was, and I'd forgotten with their new park that they had that, but it's almost a necessity in Lexington, Kentucky, to have that surface. But a lot of guys were slipping, sliding, especially getting out of the box. A lot of our hitters.
Keegan tripped. Yeah, I remember that. Keegan tripped, and if the ball doesn't get by second, I think the announcer noted that's probably a double play, but it went into right as a. Yeah, I mean, and I wonder too. Oh man, and this is a tricky topic, but I know one thing: when there's suspected bat tampering going on, you don't hear the ball off the bat very well. And you've seen some of their outfielders look really confused with the ball off the bat in recent weeks.
Yeah, it's I agree with you. It's
I don't know if that means anything, if that's just coincidence, but you start to watch reactions, and their outfield generally has not had trouble judging balls, but you've been hearing more and more talk of bat tampering and things like that. I remember in 2009 that was a thing. It was a safety issue, not just for the speed, but outfielders could not, like the hearing the ball off the bat, I guess, gives you a cue as to how hard it's hit and some things like that. And when your reactions are in split seconds and you're seeing guys that are confused, and sometimes maybe that's the sun or you just don't see the ball for whatever reason. It could be a number of things, but if that continues to be an issue, you have to wonder a little bit, I think.
No, the casual baseball fan doesn't realize that sound has a lot to do with how outfielders play. If you took the Vanderbilt outfielders and got them in a group, and they would all admit to you that one of the first instincts they do is go by sound and how ball is hit. The Kentucky announcer, and it was like, Kevin Ingram and does here. I guess they work for the SEC Plus, but it's their guys. Doug Flynn, I guess, former Cincinnati Red. Take it.
That's him. That was Doug Flynn.
He was doing the color. But they mentioned how he, as the Kentucky batter went around the bases, he kind of alluded to the fact that it was probably one of the worst home run calls ever because he's watching Spencer Jones and right, and the ball was crushed as far as distance, and he kind of gave it. He thought maybe Spencer Jones was camping under it, just like we all thought.
The camera guy didn't know either.
Yeah, and the point that I'm making that with this discussion that's been with bats and that potential guys rolling them and doing those things with them is a hot bat that is not within the regulations of the NCAA. When it is the exit velocity, a lot of times I've had coaches make it akin to the sound of a tennis racket. When a tennis racket hits a ball that's crushed on an overhand, or it's that kind of noise. It's not a noise that you would normally associate with a baseball hitting a bat, or a ping sound, or that. It's an awkward sound. And when you were an outfielder and you're trying to judge that, I mean, the sun I don't think was out at Kentucky Proud Park yesterday, and when you see Jones just throw his hand up, which I've seen him do it twice against Tennessee earlier this year in that game when he didn't know where the ball was, and that might have been some twilight issues, but it might have been some exit speed issues as well. But when you see that, sound is an instinct as an outfielder that you use to judge how far a ball is going. But yeah, that was and the noise too. It's just you heard it even on television. It makes these awkward noises that you're not used to. So Chris, we could probably do a whole show on that, and I think some people maybe have written some articles that personally about it. And,
perhaps.
And
Can I rant for a minute?
Go ahead.
I cannot believe people in the media are not looking more into this. I don't know what's true and what's not, but there's been a lot of stuff out there for weeks. And I don't know that it's necessarily all teams. I think it might be a player here or there doing it with a coach doesn't know about it or doesn't approve. I wrote an article about it on my SEC site a few weeks ago. I spoke to people at the NCAA. Their answer could not have been more, we do not care. It was alarming. I mean, my jaw was almost hitting the carpet in my office as I was talking to a rep from the NCAA. The SEC is deflecting everything to the NCAA. I just think it's awful. You don't want to see this change, policies change and concern change because somebody gets killed or hurt badly. I fear that's where this is going. That's why you have bat rules in the first place, because of safety. I just think the lack of discussion and interest in this topic to me is just it's astonishing. I don't think people know what they're looking at, but have you ever hit with the hot bat, Chip?
Oh yeah, I mean there were back in the day when a bat was hot. And these, of course, were specs when they weren't what they are today. But you get a bat that was broken in, and, everybody's using it. 1 through 9. I mean, I don't care if it's whatever size it was, because the bat itself, it almost acts like with a trampoline effect.
Yeah.
And it gets a soft spot where that material is worn to the effect of where it makes that sound that we're talking about, that thump sound, almost like a tennis racket hitting the ball hard. But it's the exit velocity, and when you're getting balls that are coming off the bat it was interesting. There was a game I was watching, and I don't know if it was and I'm trying to remember when they actually had exit velocity off the bat, as well as the miles an hour that a pitcher was throwing. But when you're getting and seeing those numbers in 105, 110, 115, that's dangerous territory. I know a couple years ago, a coach told me one time that a player at Georgia, and this was 10, 11 years ago, hit one with an exit velocity of 125 miles an hour off the bat, and the ball didn't go. The ball went over the fence on a plane that it was unique, that the coach had never seen before. It really didn't rise. I mean, it was just a line drive with an exit velocity like that. Now, someone will get killed at 120. That if it's hit to the wrong person or a pitcher or what have you. So it's really unique times here with this. I don't know why the NCAA is not looking at it. And a question that I pose,
they don't care. They don't. They just wish everybody would shut up and it would go away. That was very clear when I spoke to the NCAA.
And the strange thing was wood makes a difference whether they're protecting the game and hey, look, the game's hot. We got balance right now. Omaha is a great destination. College baseball is maybe hotter than it's ever been. We're not going to mess with anything. Well, if somebody gets killed, they're going to have to mess with it. But immediately people say, well, what if you went to wood? In the major leagues supplemented and said, okay, we want to evaluate these kids using wood so we can draft them better of how they're going to adjust. And the question becomes, well, that's a cost to it, and it's a lot more than people think. You're talking about fall ball. You're talking about practices in the cages. You're talking about game bats. It's not a cheap proposition for an organization like the NCAA, as I'm going to get on my soapbox, that won't allow a third assistant. So, they're not letting teams do that. And then the other action is they say, well, why don't they just let the Power Five? Because if you're going to allow, you're going to say no aluminum bat, no composite bats, we're going to wood. Well, Vanderbilt can afford to do that. Can Sewanee do that? Can Lipscomb do that? Can the Division III teams do that? Is it could you possibly say D1 it's going to be wood, and the D2, D3 teams and junior colleges? I think junior colleges, there's some guys out there who can swing it just as good as they just hadn't been found yet. But that's the deal. What would the budget number to be? And I'd love to ask somebody like that. I'm sure Tim would know that. What would it cost a college program budget-wise if they didn't get supplemented by the Major League Baseball? What would it cost to their bottom line budget to go to wood? I'm wondering with that.
You've got NIL now coming into play. Why could the wood bat companies not, use that to showcase their product? But anyway, the reason I asked you, I think I'm thinking back. Like I wasn't even like a weekend softball player. I played in like a Tuesday or Thursday night league back in my 20s and 30s, and I wasn't serious about it at all. And I certainly was not a power hitter. But I remember one of those games, like I wasn't even aware enough of hot bats and like into softball enough to know that was a thing. I just remember one time I used a bat. I think mine was going dead. I didn't spend any money of significance on it. And I just grabbed somebody else's bat. And I remember hitting a ball almost to dead center that a guy caught literally. I think his back may have been against the fence. And I remember thinking, I've never hit a ball that far, and I didn't even feel it off the bat. Like, it was weird. Yeah. It felt like it I don't know, it felt like I was, swinging with bubble wrap on it or something. And I hadn't thought about it again until this weekend, but I thought, I'm pretty sure I hit with the hot bat because there was no feel of the ball off the bat. And I didn't have any clue that the ball I hit was about to go as far as it did. But I was thinking back to that. I was like, I'm pretty sure I was using a hot bat that night because I remember it didn't compute at the time. I'd never hit a ball like that.
Well, those softball players who travel, those big muscle guys that you see sometimes, or maybe seen at a park, or they all have the matching uniforms and the travel bags and stuff. Those guys are totally swinging roll bats. Right. There's machines that you can get back. Those and they are tampered with, and I don't think it's against the rules. I don't think there's. I mean that's what the deal as far as getting those. That's part of the game, but college baseball probably shouldn't be that much, and unless the NCAA and the conferences get together. It's going to continue to happen. However they're doing it, I don't know. Clandestine operation.
It's not clandestine. I mean, you can Google it, and there's plenty of companies out there.
Yeah,
that are not hard to find.
Yeah.
So,
as we shall see as this continues going on, because I'm afraid that you're just seeing the numbers going crazy, continuing. And this happened 11 years ago. And I remember in 2009, 2010, there were a lot of accusations going along about it, and then it kind of quieted down, and then it kind of has reared its head again, once again. So not sure why.
Let's talk pitching. And I thought about bringing this up last week. I wanted to save it for this week to have a little more in tow, but I go back to 14 and how what they started the year with and what they ended with pitching-wise were different things. And I just look at the makeup of what they could do in postseason. I mean, I do wonder if you're not going to end up seeing something like McElvain on Friday night, maybe Christian Little on Saturday, maybe Futrell on a Game 3 situation in a regional. I doubt it's going to go like that, but you just have pieces in reserve if you're Vanderbilt that haven't even been tried in that spot. I still would love to see what Little did or could do with a bigger chance. Futrell, we've had that conversation before. We just don't know. But the big thing is, no matter how they slice it, I'm not trying to slight Holton or any of those other guys. I think with Riley, they've found a spot for him where it works. I think with Bryce Cunningham, they're finding a spot where it works, where he's really more of an opener than a starter, where he's just so around the plate that sometimes he's going to get hit, but he's mostly not going to beat himself. And I think his changeup the other day seemed like was really good too. I thought he was very effective. I could be wrong, but that looked like the pitch he was using. Maybe I'm confusing him with somebody else, but I just look back and I go, they've still got a lot of pieces and they've still got a lot of options that have not been tried. And I get that it's not Rocker and Leiter or it's not Fulmer and Buehler. I'm not saying it is, because it's not. They don't have the stud starting rotation combo that you just look at, when you're coming in a weekend and playing them and going, oh no, we got to face those guys. But I do think you have some potential options with upside, because we know how talented Little is. We've seen what Futrell has done in the midweek. I just wonder what that's going to look like when it really matters, because they've got tons of pieces there and a lot more than they had a year ago.
Yeah, I don't recall, Chris, a year in the last probably 4 or 5, even, and we're talking about some years winning the national title, that there's been this much balance as far as potential starting pitchers. I don't think it's even close. I mean, you've got Futrell with 8 starts, McElvain with 10, Holton with 10, but then you have Cunningham has 3, Riley has 3, Maldonado started 3 games, Grayson Moore 1, and Hunter Owen has started a game, and with 26 2/3 innings. So the heartburn of being on a Monday night regional game, winner take all, Game 5 of a regional, where you slip up in a team where they've been before, having the idea of pitching a Christian Little, that's a great problem to have for Vanderbilt, more so than there's, and that's not saying bad things about who's been there in the past, but that experience and those guys being on the mound, that's not this team's problem. That's not what should keep Tim Corbin and Brownie up at night, is the experience they have to roll guys out there and count on them to throw strikes and to get people out and to win a series. I think it's the hitting is more of the issue and finding a stable lineup. But, I mean, I'm sure you agree, the numbers don't lie. There's more innings balanced, and I talked about this maybe a show or two ago, than they've ever had before. And that's going to bode well for them in an SEC tournament. It's going to bode well for them in a regional. If they get into trouble and somebody has a bad night in Game 1 and they got to turn to somebody to go innings 2 through 7, for example, if they can't get out of the first, but they have to make a switch, they've got the arms to do that. So that's been you look at where they are, 2.92 ERA as a team. They've spread things out with appearances. They go really, really deep. Schultz, is kind of looks like he's assumed the closer role yesterday. Made it a little harder probably than it should have been, but got out of it, and he's completed, a couple games here lately he's got 6 saves, so it looks like he's the guy who's getting the ball. And then you've got, as he's building back, Maldonado, a guy who's been in that role last year and was the guy last year. You still got him back there to fill the void as well. So pitching's, I don't think is the least of their problems. Just working it out the lineup and hitting to get it straight for this team to go forward.
I don't mean to harp on the fan base, but I think this is interesting. And then I think it's more about expectations than it's a fan base. But like based on the way that people have talked about their pitching this year, where would you guess they rank nationally in run prevention?
Oh, if I were guessing based on the reaction, I'd think middle of the pack.
Yeah, well, they're second.
You're right.
They're allowing 3. I'm looking at Warren Nolan. Tennessee's allowing 2.4 runs a game. They're allowing 3.3. Connecticut's 3.4. And then you got Southern Miss 3.4, Arkansas 3.5. So, I mean, they're getting the job done. It's just not what we're used to. I don't ever remember a year like this. I mean, heck, you go back as far as long as Tim's been here, and 2004, they went Sowers, who was first-team All-American, Mullins in the 2, who was about as good, and sometimes Bushman would throw in that 3 spot. I remember he threw a complete game, I think, down at LSU one year. Maybe it was that year, and he could go 7 or 8. Sometimes Jensen Lewis would throw in that spot. Sometimes they'd throw him out of the bullpen. Like, every year they've ever had, they always had a dude. Whether it was a Sonny Gray or a Kyle Wright or a Fulmer, this is the only year they haven't had a guy. And it comes off a year where they had the best, probably 1-2 punch they've ever had. And I just don't think people can process it because it's not the way they've done it before.
Yeah, and you get the true indication of how others feel about this staff when you hear Doug Flynn on the broadcast this weekend when Christian Little came into the game. I don't know if you heard him, what he said, but he said, you've got a guy who's thrown no hits. He's no hit you for 7. And congratulations, you get to face a guy who's throwing 95 right out of the pen. And he's talking about Christian Little. And that, I think that's the bewilderment that most people have. And going down this roster of pitchers, when you look at it, I dare to say there is not one guy on this staff, maybe Berkwich. I think Berkwich is more of a middle 80s, upper 80s guy. I'm looking down here. I don't know if there's a single guy who doesn't throw 90 plus. And don't get me started on that, because back when we played in the league, in the SEC, you had Russ Springer, Ben McDonald, Greg Olson from Auburn. They threw 90. Everybody else was upper 80s, 86 to 88, and those guys threw in the low 90s. But now, as a staff, even Donye Evans the other night was low 90s. So the velocity itself, if you can throw strikes and get people out, not hit anybody, not walk anybody, that's impressive as it is to see that many guys throw. Futrell's upper 80s. I don't think he lives low 90s, but Berkwich and Futrell. But other than those two guys, and it's still, look, 88 and 87 is tough to hit when you got movement. But it's a velocity heavy staff, and that's kind of the way it's gotten with some different stuff around the country with drive line and kids getting stronger and bigger. But still, that's an amazing thing when you can bring guys out, and sometimes the third and fourth guy of the pen, and he's pumping 90 miles an hour.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Schultz. He's been terrific. Was I thought the MVP of that game yesterday? It got a little dicey late. Trying to remember, did they intentionally walk a guy? I've got the box score here.
On Sunday?
Yeah, no, they didn't intentionally walk him. I guess they sort of pitched around Ryan Ritter, and then they got a pretty loud out to Spencer Jones and Wright.
Right.
So that got dicey. But Schultz, I just did not think that was going to work in the closing role. I didn't think he had a put-away pitch, but I think he's been... Schultz is a guy that was dealing with the changeup yesterday. I thought that was really good. he just kept them off balance. Maybe it works a little better against the backdrop of 90-something with every arm, as you mentioned, but for whatever reason, it's working for them. And I feel like you kind of can trust him in that role, which I didn't know I was going to feel that way 2 months ago. But he's a different guy. He's gotten his confidence back. He's a strike thrower. But it's funny, you mentioned Hunter Owen, and part of me just goes, what's he done?
Right.
To not throw in 2 weeks or whatever. I don't know if that's the case or not. It just may be you've only got 27 innings most weekends. And, you get a guy like McElvain coming out and throwing 7 no-hit innings. That shortens everybody. And I really wonder, look, I don't know if it's that. And Owen wasn't as good his last couple times around. I just think they've got such a competitive situation. There's just not room for everybody right now. Evans threw well 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Last week and didn't see him. I think they're in a spot where it's the exact opposite of Omaha last year, where it's Rocker, Leiter, Maldonado, and then you just hold your breath and grip the dugout rails with white knuckles when everybody else throws.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about, the balance that the staff has. So if they can turn it around with the consistency, hey, look, they've won back-to-back series. So let's don't bemoan the fact that we're counting that as being a negative. Beat Florida, beat Kentucky on the road, win your first SEC series on the road. You got a nationally ranked team coming into your place that's won 3 series in a row. It's going to be highly competitive, hopefully. So the ship is pointing in the right direction. It's like one of those icebreaker boats that you see that's just plowing through the ice, and you want to just stay steady. It's not a swift movement, but at least the boat's going in the right direction, and you're going forward, and just keeping it all together. Playing at home's a good thing, and you only got one more after this one with LSU. 2 home, 2 road, so you got to make the most of it.
Almost forgot the mailbag. Are you ready to go there?
Yeah, let's take a stab.
The mailbag is sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. And Arbor says, are you concerned about runners left on base, or is that something that corrects over time?
Well, sure. It bothered me on Saturday. And even though when you look at the stat sheet, 7 only left 7 on base. We left 14 on base on Friday and 13 on Sunday. But boy, 7 on Saturday seemed a lot more than 7. Than it just in your mind when you're thinking back on the game. Sure, it does. That Saturday contest I mentioned, that seemed like a bunch of guys were lifting the base, trying to lift the ball and doing some things with their bat head that was not indicative of the way they did on Friday night. But yeah, sure, it's concerning. You like to think that it would work itself out over time, but we're past the halfway point, and it's time to find some guys who, with consistency, especially as we talked about those spots 7 through 9. You got to get it turned around there if you're going to do the things you want to do. But yeah, it's concerning. Hitting into double plays, a lot of fly ball outs, lifting. Those are the traits I see that I don't like. And stranded runners on. It's not like they're trying to. It's not like their pitchers aren't trying to throw strikes. One of those things I've always laugh about, which the coach is yelling, "Throw strikes." Well, it's not like they're not trying to, but just like they're not trying to hit the ball the other way and do the disciplined things you have to do. But we'll just have to see. But it is a little concerning to me, to answer the question directly. Yes, but it's just weird how it felt a lot more, even with half the numbers that they had the games 1 and 3. In the game they lost, it seemed like it was just a lot more amplified than it was.
Well, a couple things. I'm going back and looking at the scorecard from Saturday. You talked about it felt like they left more on than they did. I think the thing was they had runners in scoring position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 innings and didn't get a guy in. And sometimes they had more than one. Like they'd get more than one guy to second base in the same inning. But I think the thing there is they only got the leadoff man on twice, so some of that is, you get a guy on and a ground ball out moves a guy up, and another one moves a guy up, and then a single scores him. I think it's just the order in which they got them. And we could talk about the bottom of the order, but I think we've already had that discussion. Although when Polk was in there, and Parker Nolan too. Parker Nolan has hit better in SEC play than people give him credit for.
He has, yes. Absolutely.
But I say this, and I sound like I'm an apologist, but I think that people that study that stuff say it generally comes around. Like the thing that's debated in pro balls, like, is there any such thing as clutch hitting? And David Ortiz is always the name that comes up, and you can. I'm sure you could find some wormholes on the internet and spend some time there if you're so inclined, but. I would rather have that issue than the other one where they just don't get guys on, because you got to get guys on to generate scoring opportunities. So I don't look at that as, like if they go and, they're out in the postseason, they lose a game because they've left, 14 guys on base, then it will have been a problem. But as a predictor going forward, I don't see it as a problem because I think that generally comes around. And what, they're second in the league in batting average?
Yeah.
Their strikeout rate in the league is, I think, one of the lower ones. Now, sometimes the quality of contact hasn't been great at times, but I look underneath the hood on some of those things, and I don't see serious cause for alarm. Now, again, what they're going to have to figure out is the bottom of that order. And again, I think they've got some pieces, but in terms of a team-wide trend like that, it doesn't bother me as much as it does everybody else.
Yeah, and it's just those things are compounded. And you mentioned your stats that you said a couple weeks ago. I think you mentioned how bemoaning the fact of the strikeouts per game, that it's not as bad as it actually you would think it is.
Everybody strikes out now. Everybody does. Tennessee, I think Tennessee strikes out at a higher rate than they do, or it's like neck and neck.
It just doesn't seem that when it's your own team and you're leaving runners on and you're striking out and you're hitting into a lot of double plays. I think it just kind of amplifies each one of them.
Yeah, no, the double plays, I think that's a little bit of an issue because they seem to go through spells where they hit an inordinate number of ground balls, which again goes back to quality of content or quality of contact. So
absolutely.
Strikeout rate for the year in all games. No, I'm sorry, SEC games, Tennessee 22.5%, Vandy 22%.
Yeah, there we
go. So best hitting team in the league, hands down, and strikeouts between those teams are almost identical. So, Anyway. Let's see. Ann Arbor asks, how do you explain the fact that since 99, only one number one seed, Miami in 99, has won the College World Series?
It's just balance. It's total balance. I mean, growing up, even in the 90s, 80s, 90s, even following it when I got out of school, you had Florida State, Arizona, Texas. Who else was in there, Chris? Help me out. I mean, every year. USC. It was, but it was always Florida State,
Arizona
always
State,
Texas, Arizona State.
Long Beach State.
Right. It was those
Mississippi
teams.
State, yeah.
And there's just that much more excitement in the game, and recruiting is amped up, and programs have built, teams have built stadiums, and they're nicer than some minor league parks, but you're just having more across the board consistency and you still have they bemoan the fact that there's not a lot of teams from the East ever, and Michigan, of course, if you can say that's more Midwest, but the teams north of the Mason-Dixon line in that corridor hardly have any representation. Correct me if I'm wrong, in Omaha. And the warm weather schools and the cold weather schools, but I think it just has to do with balance, balance across the board. Texas, as much as Texas is a revered program, sure they've been to Omaha a few times lately, but it used to be an every year. Oklahoma State and those teams, and it's just more teams are spending money in their programs and getting quality coaches and I think you'll continue to see, and I still think the misnomer, the 1 year that, what was it, after 2014? Let me do the math here. It was 2015 when the school from South Carolina won it.
No, that was 16 because in 15 was the year Virginia beat Vandy with a team that wasn't all that good.
Yeah, and then was it?
Coastal Carolina won it in 16.
Yeah, that was one of those oddball, like, you shake your head because have they done anything since?
Not really.
Yeah, and you just one of those. Not saying fluke. It was just one of those weird.
Fresno State in 09.
Right.
That was absolutely a hot bats thing.
Let's
just call that one what it was.
Bats were hot back in 2009. I'm telling you,
bats were very hot in 09.
Oh yeah. So,
I would say I would bet a pretty decent amount of money that in the next 22 years you get more than one number one overall that wins this.
I would think so. I agree.
And frankly, Tennessee is at the rate it's playing. Man, the ballpark's an equalizer, but I'd almost take them against the field right now.
Well, yeah,
and they're gonna have to do a lot to lose the number one overall, which I don't think they're gonna lose.
And to think that they brought the fences in at TD Ameritrade Park from a few years ago when we won the title, and that first year the Norwood homer was with the fences back, right? Am I correct? I'm pretty sure.
Let's see,
because there weren't any home runs back in that when out there for that. I mean,
that's when they deadened the bats, and you had to hit it. I don't think Pujols was getting any out of that yard.
right.
So yeah. Anyway, last one, Commodores 94, which former Vandy boys currently in the minor leagues do you expect to be in the majors soon?
Good question. You would have to think the favorite would just be Blade, just how he did in the fall league, and he had a lot of accolades there. He's a high draft pick. Spent some money on him. I know he's still adjusting to the pro game, but I think Blade, I wouldn't be surprised if you see him make the big jump. And I think you and I talked about this at one point, Chris. I still think with the struggles that the Rangers are having, I would not be surprised if Jack Leiter's up soon. Not soon, but I know he's in Double-A now. I checked that out the other day. My son is my stat organizer. I'll ask him a question and he'll look it up. He's at that age. He loves it. But I think he's in Double-A. Not sure where he is, but he's at that level. But a lot of kids, and it is not anything for a kid to jump Double-A to the major leagues these days, especially top prospects. A lot of people think, well, he's only in Double-A. Doesn't he have to go to Triple-A? Not anymore. When you got a guy like Jack Leiter with the experience that he has, he's played at a very high level. And a lot of pros will tell you that a lot of your most competitive baseball is actually Double-A. Triple-A, you got some guys who are going back and forth, or guys who are hanging on, or not to say there's not talent there, but it is wildly competitive at Double-A, and so that's where he is now. But I would say Blade and Leiter, and who goes first, I'm going to guess it's just going to be Blade perhaps sometime this summer, but I wouldn't be surprised if Leiter is up right after him, and definitely when the rosters expand.
Don't forget Austin Martin.
That's true. Yeah. Austin. I guess Austin can't get traded to the Yankees. Do they still have the hair rule? With
I don't know. I saw the picture somebody posted on our site today. I loved Austin Martin as a player. I think
he's great, man.
I think Austin Martin, had he gotten 2020, might have gone down as the greatest player they ever had.
Oh, he's a hell of a player, man.
I mean, I don't think people understand. Like, he won when they did that short time where they did WAR for college baseball players. He was the WAR leader for college baseball in 2019. Of course, lost most of 2020 to COVID, and was a much better hitter. He didn't put up home run and RBI numbers, but he got on base. I don't think people realize how good he was going to end up being, if he'd finished out that year. But
yeah,
he'd be in there. Who else are we leaving out? Is Jake Eaters hurt, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Is Ben Bowden, is he still with the Rockies?
I think so. I don't think he's in the bigs, or is he in the bigs?
I'm not sure.
He pitched a good bit a year ago. He and Sheffield have been back and forth, I think, a little bit.
Right. So there's still about. It's weird when you see guys, and I think it was on your board that Penn Murphy, who didn't graduate from Vanderbilt, left last year, played somewhere else. He just got called up by the Mariners, a local product, and it's just you. I mean, I hate to say this. I mean, you just forget the names. There's so many. There's so many guys who get drafted and really, really good players. That matter of fact, I did the other day. I was sitting here at work and I went down the Google tunnel and just like the abyss pit that was Google, and I started where I wonder what so and so where he's playing now, and you get these guys that are like, oh, he's out of the game now. The guys he just played 2 or 3 years ago, and then other guys are still in there, and they're in their 4th or 5th year of minor league baseball, and it's just. When you start doing it, you just kind of go. Your mind wanders, and it's a different thing riding those buses 12 hours and AA ball, single A ball, and doing those things. It's just it's a not a glamorous life, but when you make it, it's certainly special.
I just looked up Jack Leiter's line, and it is the most 2022 pitching line you can imagine. He has made 3 starts. And he's thrown 9 2/3 innings. He has walked 8 and struck out 16. And hitters are 167 against him.
Yeah. But they're not. A lot of times when you get in those levels, they're not pitching guys to death.
Yeah,
they're not letting them extending them 8, 9 innings. So he's just getting his feet wet. But what are the Rangers are in last place? I think. I know they've lost a bunch of games in a row.
I've heard they did not want to bring him up this year.
Really? Okay.
And like if he keeps walking guys, that certainly is going to give them an excuse. So,
yeah,
I still think he could get a lot of outs right now, even with that. But
right, exactly.
I think he was the most talented college pitcher I've ever seen.
He's pretty dominant.
I mean, who would you push back on?
Oh gosh.
I mean, David Price was incredibly talented. Walker Buehler, just the number of pitches he could throw was. You could see he was unbelievably talented. But I don't know that I've seen somebody like Leiter who could just dominate with so many pitches. And remember, he only pitched, a year and a fifth?
Right. That's true because of COVID.
So, yeah.
Missed out that year. Missed out on a year. Missed out that year that you talk about, the lost year.
I would kill to have 2020 back just to see what would happen in college baseball.
Yeah.
And it just screwed so much stuff up going forward with fifth and sixth year seniors and the draft, and it just feels like it's going to take a while for things to get sort of back to normal.
Yeah, and even and I'm just digress here a minute, but just it screwed up just even on non-athletic deals as far as college, where you have a bunch of people who took gap years. So kids applying to college are competing with all those people who took gap years. And didn't go to school because of COVID. So you're seeing a lot of kids just trying to get in college now that are not getting in good colleges because the applicant pool. My point is it's going to take agreeing with you. It's going to take a while to flush all those people out as far as just regular Joes and Jills getting in school. It is going to do the same athletically. For these guys with the draft being limited and you got a bunch of old guys playing and it's going to take a while to flush all that out.
Chip, that's all I've got this week. Any parting thoughts? And, of course, I'll give you the floor to talk about the real estate business on your way out.
No, I don't have any parting thoughts other than just recap. Big week coming up. A lot of people get out the Hawk this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, support these guys as they head back home because they've got a tall task ahead of them with 4 big series, but it doesn't get any easier in this conference, and I'm sure the crowds will be rocking. Hopefully the weather, I think, looking long-term is going to be good, so good to see everybody out there at the games and hopefully have another successful weekend, get another series win. As far as the real estate business goes, I'll just do real short here, plug our company, Frederick and Clark Realty. Been around since the early 1960s, family-owned, 2 offices, 1 in Brentwood, 1 in Nashville. We got 180 agents, and we appreciate everyone's support. I've heard some folks who've used our agents and have made contact with me, and we appreciate them doing business with our agents. In these times of this crazy market that still exists. I know that interest rates have bumped up a little bit. People aren't refinancing as much, and that doesn't really have anything to do with the buy and sell process. But things kind of, you would think they're slowing down as far as you look at those numbers, but they're not, because it is still very much of a seller's market, and Nashville's such a hot place to live. My point is, you need representation. You don't need to do this alone. I know there's a lot of advertisers out there who promote that. You need to maximize your value on the sales side. The guaranteed offers that you hear, those are great, but why not maximize and use competition, people bidding each other for your home? We know how to do that. Our agents have been through in the trenches as far as those on the sell side, and then buying on the flip side. You need to have somebody who knows how to navigate those waters as far as getting you the home that you really, really want and the place that you really want to live. So check our website at frederickandclark.com. You can call us at 615-327-4800, and that's all I got.
Chip, thanks a bunch, and we'll catch up next week.
All right, Chris, take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones, DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.